Good evening to everyone here, and good morning to those joining from Singapore, and good your time from wherever you may be joining. So let's sit quietly for a while to calm our body and mind. Let's cultivate our merit field, visualizing Shakyamuni Buddha in the space above oneself, radiant, exuding love, compassion, wisdom, understanding, awakening. In the form of rays of light that touch us, the mere touch of which brings us a taste of those qualities. With each of those qualities having been completely perfected, try to see some connection between some teeny tiny speck of those qualities within us, just growing or just beginning to take shape. See the connection with the budding, or just similitude, sparks of those qualities to the completely perfected state of those qualities in the Buddhas. Taking clue of how we got to this spark of quality, listening, from reflecting, and from taking time out in meditating. Take a clue from this of how consistent efforts can make them grow and eventually evolve into a full perfected quality. Each one of them, one by one, make sense of how it's possible to take long, but nonetheless, if we persist in it, we can make sense of its possibility of evolving. Provided we bring causes and conditions concordant with that. Let that generate some level of hope delight and bring in encouragement, particularly in view of the suffering sentient beings, fellow sentient beings that we visualize surrounding us, all in human forms. Joining us in this recitation as well as in this sharing, yet all of them undergoing their own respective, both common and unique samsaric predispositions. Some very grave, so much so that they don't have even a small pocket of respite from their incessant sufferings, gross sufferings. But nonetheless, all of us sharing the fact that our future is in the hands of afflictions, actions induced by them. How the weight, the strength of our dispositions into negativities kind of ever ready to misdirect us in our actions, in our thoughts. Or the effort to generate positivity, to divert that negative direction into a positive one. Though possible, it requires doubling down our efforts against this force of negative dispositions. On these grounds and others, try to generate a sense of affinity with the sentient beings, growing into empathy, into a sense of genuine love and compassion, into bodhicitta. Making us firm in our determination to pursue the path to full awakening, which is only when we'll be able to really benefit all sentient beings without exception, in the truest sense of the word. At the very least, on our part, nothing will be falling short of. That's the quality that the Buddhas have. But in terms of connecting with the sentient beings, it takes more than fully awakened state of being. There needs to be some connections, karmic or otherwise, to be able to connect with the sentient beings. And on top of that, when we pursue awakening, we ourselves get to realize the full potential of our positivity. And thus, at least on our part, be always ready and capable of benefiting anyone, anywhere, anytime, so long as they fulfill their part of being sensitive to the connection. Based on these reflections and others, feel more boosted in our aspiration to attain full awakening for the sake of all sentient beings. Of course, complemented by all the required wisdoms in other parts of the path. With our mind sets, with our mind, mental states drenched in this reflection-influenced mode of mentality. Let's recite the homage together. Let's once again renew the attitude of bodhicitta that we just cultivated. Let that mind of bodhicitta be also touched by the appreciation of how precious the human birth that we have taken is. But the mere preciousness of it, mere rarity of it, and the mere capacity of it, in really obtaining great meaning is not enough. On top of recognizing it, we should be able to make use of it, make the most out of it. Just being born as human is no guarantee that the next time will be also a human. In fact, in Vinaya Vastu, it tells how sentient beings in the lower realms being born into lower realm in the next life, and sentient beings born as humans and reborn as animals, others in the lower realms. They are as numerous, comparable to the whole atoms of dusts on the earth. It says of the big land mass, whereas those who are reborn from the animals into the humans, other higher rebirths, is very rare. And likewise, there's no guarantee that humans necessarily succeed in taking most use of their precious human birth. And thus there's no guarantee in being born as humans or gods in the next life. That too is very rare. And to a certain extent, we can all relate to that, see that, how we humans, despite the fact that we are equipped with such a wonderful brain, which serves as a medium through which we could get to express our mental capacities, most of the time to the point of being able to really plan ahead, think deep, think vast, big, think of bodhicitta. What can be more vast and more profound and more benevolent a mindset than this? Humans are capable of generating it. Yet at the same time, we are witness to the fact that humans spend their time, waste their time on other trivial things, things that would end just before they die, not even get to experience them at the time of their death, even before death gets them. Many of the things that they would have spent their whole entire life and have, by worldly standard, have achieved a lot. All of them would have already become meaningless. And on top of that, many would have gotten to those areas, those positions, those milestones by so much negative ways, if not blatant physical, verbal ways, but nonetheless, very possibly, most of the time with negative attitudes. From that we can guess where would their next life be. Just before death sets in, what kind of a mindset they could be in, given the fact that all they have worked for has stopped being of any meaning. Just leaving them feeling completely empty. At the same time, not efforts had gone into wondering about the possibility of continuation after death. Thus, having to move into a completely unexplored, uninformed, clueless period. Based on this, feel more encouraged to even strengthen one's bodhicitta mind, wherever it may be at this stage, to have more further, deeper, stronger, clearer, well grounded, supported level. This is the mind set, the best mindset we can come up with. At the same time, the mindset that would have the greatest promise of benefiting not just oneself, all sentient beings without exception. Just the cultivation of it, almost we can say, touches every sentient being, irrespective of whether we know them or not. Because in our mindset, we would not have left them out. How wonderful is this? Let's determine to put more effort in strengthening this bodhicitta attitude, as well as spend our time this evening or this morning with our mindset influenced, drenched in bodhicitta mode. We were on page 284, right? Is it 284? I think we finished. Pardon? We finished the first paragraph. Oh, okay. Yeah. Within affliction, wisdom abides. Here, wisdom refers to the cognitive component of that mind. Its clarity and cognizance, not to actual wisdom. That cognitive component is called wisdom because it is the cause for wisdom to arise in the future. The meaning is that amidst the afflictions this undefiled, clear cognitive component of rigpa exists. Rigpa is sometimes translated as natural mind, uncontrived, unaffected, natural mind, but then it seems to refer to more than just mere natural mind, something which is more subtle and serves as the main continuum to becoming fully awakened, omniscient mind of a Buddha. In the new translation school of Tantrayana, this primordially pure mind is called the clear light mind. So I used to have some problem with this usage of the term primordial. But here, primordially pure mind could be understood both in conventional sense and ultimate sense. And in ultimate sense, it's strangely quite acceptable, easily acceptable, because it's saying that it's by its very nature dependently arisen because of that, with no intrinsic identity of its own, thus cleared of its what would have been a nature-related affliction been completely freed of. So thus the malleability of it, because of its being malleable in the first place, of being merely contingent on causes and conditions, thus once you rearrange that causes and conditions configuration, there is no choice but for it to change. So in that sense, and so that's kind of a broad brush of the ultimate nature. But if you kind of filter it further, and what it lands on is that it utterly lacks any objective substance or objective essence of its own, but being instead it is just thoroughly contingent on others, thus having a borrowed existence. So in that respect, it leaves not the slightest room for any objective, any justified objective fixation. So from that point of view, it is primordially pure. And that kind of a primordial purity is understandable because things have got to be dependently arisen. And thus would have no room for any kind of an intrinsic identity. Now the other thing, the conventional aspect of the primordially pure nature would depend on first asserting that yes, there is a mind other than the brain. Not that the mind functions or enjoys a separate, unrelated existence when it is in an embodied form, embodied state, because so long as it is embodied, it would have to embody it with the brain. Then it would have to function or express through the brain. But nonetheless, is that connection kind of just merely confined to the physical body, so much so that it comes after, if not before, if not at the same time as the body comes about. It comes later than the body, and then it recedes or it ceases to exist when the bodily function stops. Is it just that, or is it beyond that? That's a very important question. Then on that basis, then we will begin to see, okay, if that extends beyond an embodied being, a brain, or whatever, then on top of that, then we have to make sense of how it is conventionally pure, that the defilements are mere adventitious, and the defilements never ever make into the very nature of the mind. So very often we think of this, you may already have considered this, we think of this relationship, at least approach from the Buddhist point of view, we think of this relationship between body and mind in more of a, to use a modern analogy, the computer hard drive, hardware and software. So long as they are there, they're like functioning together, but that doesn't mean that they are one and the same. And before I became familiar with computer, what I used to think of in terms of this relationship between body and mind is radio, transistor radio. It would look like everything. The person, there might be even a person in it, and that the person is dependent on the parts of the computer or the radio. In that, if you fiddle with it, it goes off. It kind of, you can change the voice and all of that. But it has to have a transmission station somewhere out. If they stop it, no matter how you fiddle it, how much you polish it, how much you really care after it, there would be no voice there. So that's something to think about and look for clues to that. I don't know if this will help or not. Last time I was struggling to find out what that story was about. Some man, and when there was something very kindly looked it up just that very night and sent it to me. It says it's indeed the Invisibilia episode first. That part I remembered. Invisibilia. But after that I didn't necessarily wait for that, look for that. I just have the NPR on, and then whatever happens to be when I'm doing something else that I could listen to, then I just listen it. So I didn't follow up on that. But the first episode is about a man who got trapped, as per the caption of the explanation, who got trapped in his own body for how many years? Yeah, 12 years. A man trapped in his own body for 12 years. Trapped in such a way that for the first 2 years he didn't have any sense of his being existing. But his body was going on. Somehow they said that the parents, when they had to take the body back, the doctor said that it's as good as not being there. You just take it and wait until it dies. And at one point, the mother is said to have spoken to the body, which is almost like a totally unmoving, nothing. That may you die. I hope you die soon. But the person heard it. How? I mean, thinking of that, it's just imagining what it would be like to go through that for 12 years, 360 plus days, 12 times, each with 24 hours. So for the first 2 years, he said that he didn't have any sense of his being there. But his body kept going, evidently, because that involved feeding him, washing him, taking him, putting him on the bus, and taking him to a place where they could just give him so that the parents could go work. And what that place would do is just give him in his chair. What do you call that? Yeah, wheelchair, in front of a TV, and everybody would go about their thing. But he was, after 2 years, he was aware of everything. His eyes could see, his ears can hear, but he wasn't able to even move them, maybe. But later on, somehow, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, what he went through. He had to come up with his own ways to deal with it. Like really saying, this is enough, now I need to really take ownership of this and at least get some sense of control over myself. So his mind was very clear from the second year onward. For the first 2 years, who knows what happened? He was not moving at all on his own, not even eyes, nothing. And then somehow he was pushing himself to kind of get to know the time, because he was so bored, because they would always play the same thing. What is the play called? Barney. Yeah. So what does that mean? Yeah. What's it? I love you, you love me. Something has to do with it. And yeah, something with the burning. That part I couldn't catch, except I listened to it. It played that, but I don't have any idea. So he was exposed to it day after day after day. That he hated it. Then eventually he had to train himself to kind of not think negative by blocking the thoughts. And he got very good at it. So he was meditating in his vegetative body. And then eventually he said, even that is not good. That's like whisking oneself out of existence. Like completely blocking the thoughts, right? Eventually he had to come up with ways by which he could turn around things around. Like mother is saying this thing, he would kind of empathize with her, put himself in her shoes, look at him, and then think of what her son has become compared to how he was, apparently very active and like that. So that way he taught himself to come up with positive ways of looking at it. That really gave him strength, and his body healed a little bit. It's quite telling. And then eventually he began to be able to tell time to himself, not to anybody else, but time to himself, by piecing together things. Like there will be someone speaking about time, or some clues about now it's over, and then eventually he began to see the sunlight, the shadows, but that he could tell time. So that kind of gave him some control, sense of control, able to do something. And then it eventually healed his body. But not completely. After he became, after 12 years, when he began to move his body, mind, eyes, and eventually healed, he was still dependent on what do you call the computer.
Something that talks with him.
Yeah. What do you call that? Yeah, exactly. The one that Steve Hawkins was using, same thing. Yeah. So he didn't get completely healed, but he was able to not only move his body, but not move in the sense of really walk, but still be dependent on wheelchair, but able to kind of stand upright and then type. But there would be a case of not completely complete body shut down. Of course, we would say the brain would be still, but in a strange way, doctors, everyone who explored all possible means by which to see that he's getting some signal or whatnot, they couldn't find at all. No way by which to detect of his awareness. So that might include brain also. That's exactly what the recording said. The mother was recounting it. But then there are many other clues of possible continuation from before. If we did continue from before, it would be only mind and mind-related very subtle things, not this body. Of course, we didn't come with this body from before, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is the brain is not as smart as the mind. Mind can really make difference between loving kindness, compassion, concern about others' suffering, and then suffering involuntarily. Mind can make a big difference and feel a big difference. One will be debilitating, other one will be strengthening, giving more you strength. But the brain doesn't make this difference. Likewise, brain doesn't make difference between an imagined thing and an actual thing. It just works the same thing. From that, it looks like it's mechanical. Like the smoke detector. I found it out later on. One time the smoke detector went off in my room. I said, what in the world happened? I had just taken a shower and then the door was not completely closed. So the steam might have gone there. No smoke, but steam. It didn't detect smoke. It just detected something going through it. And later I learned from Venerable Rinchen that sometimes even dust could make it go off. So it's like, it is named smoke detector, but it doesn't necessarily make a difference. Likewise, the brain seems to be kind of emergent, or what do you call it, the producing quality of mind, but and kind of almost equivalent to it, but it seems to be more mechanical than the mind is. Plus, His Holiness the Dalai Lama very often shares this. He was once during one of his visits, he had a conversation with a scientist, neuroscientist, very possibly, and His Holiness asked him, from how mind and brain works and whatnot, don't you see the possibility that sometimes it's a turn of the mind to turn the brain on? Like a mental state would come and it would turn on the brain and affected. So effect going other way around. When he asked this, the scientist said, yes, theoretically it seems to be possible. No, not theoretically. Principally it seems to be possible, but it should not be, because that will go against the standpoint, what do you call mm, the basic position of the neuroscientists, that mind is an emergent property of brain, that it should always come from it, not from it, not the other way around. So His Holiness comments that comment is not scientific. That is biased on its own, scientific bias. Very often, Samdong Rinpoche calls it scientific blind faith. They have their own blind faith. Kind of, unless something really, really dramatic happens, they're not ready to even question the, what do you call, basic premise. The basic premise, very basic, basic concept. Basic concept. So on a gross level, they may be able to explain things, but when it comes to subtle things, such as like the time of death, out-of-body experiences or whatnot, then one has to look for some other clues. So the reason why I'm speaking about all this is why I went off this way and this way and this way. is I was talking of the primordially pure, to make sense of that. So the primordial nature of it sometimes gives us an impression of something given from the very beginning, or from the very beginning, that's the beginning. But how to kind of see it possible, it being possible, is something we need to kind of encounter and face. So in this regard, at least for me, making sense of primordial purity from this ultimate point of view is easier than the conventional point of view. But there, the idea, the what it hinges on is the fact that our mind, our individual mind, may precede our birth, our brain of this life, and how, given that, we can make a case of its being primordially pure in the conventional sense, in the sense that it is like a ball of glass, which is pure, undefiled in its nature, but it could be temporarily perceived to be defiled, or perceived to be kind of affected by other peripheral causes and conditions. So right now, the difference between sensory consciousness, mental consciousness, is not that clear cut, and of course not on the basis of how brain functions. We feel the difference, but in terms of brain reading, it's very difficult to make the distinction. I used to think, and I used to share this with my fellow monks studying science. I was thinking that the perception that happens at the back of the brain, now it's the brain divisions. What do you call the back one? Not temporal. Yeah, occipital. Mind really works so strange. When I moved from there, I decided in that condition, I thought, okay, now this may be it. I might not have anything to do with it. That kind of a mindset kind of really makes whatever you are living kind of go even quicker. So that's why it takes a while for me to remember. So, yeah, occipital. So I used to think that in the case of a visual consciousness, when it meets with a stimulus and it hits the receptors on the retina, maybe even a little further than that, through the optic nerve into some midway through the brain, it's still eye consciousness. When the information goes through the optical chiasm and then further into the perception level, then it might be mental consciousness. But even the scientists do not seem to buy it. Because as you say, it perceives it, but even though in the Buddhist understanding, visual consciousness would have to have perception within its composition, but perceiving in the way that they speak of, in terms of recognizing something, is not typical of sensory consciousness. Sensory consciousness are almost like mute, unable to explain themselves. And then in a way, my proposition is not completely out of the blue. I was backing it up with the fact that in the neuroscience, you speak of what you call blind sight, sight blind. Pardon? No, not blind spot. It has a very interesting name. Not interesting. I mean, quite telling name. Sight. You don't say sight blindness. Anyway, yeah. I see. I kind of cast it away so much that. Anyway, what it does is. It has something to do with sight and blind, but I don't know how to combine them. Anyway, if they have some defect in the visual cortex, yeah, somewhere near the occipital, blind sight, yes, it is blind sight, sight blind sight, something. It's mirror labeled. No, not left. So it is blind sight in that you are blind in being not able to tell which is what, but at the same time you will be able to steer your way through the things. So you will not be able to recognize things. What is this? What is this? But somehow you see something, and thereby you are able to steer your way through it. So that's called blind sight. Blind, but at the same time sighted. And the reason for that is that the defect is not in the eyesight, but somewhere between the optic nerve and the area where the perception happens. So you cannot generate perception, but at the same time, almost quote unquote see. so that you would be able to navigate your passage through things, but not able to tell, oh, this is this, I might bump into this is this, not that kind of a perception. So that's the reason why I was saying, oh, that person might have eye sense consciousness, but not mental consciousness following the sense consciousness. That's the reason why I proposed it, but people didn't buy into it. So I was providing a clue that maybe you can come up with a distinction between eye sense consciousness and mental consciousness, but they're not ready to buy into it. So they do not have still a way of telling when we generate mental consciousness and when we generate sense consciousness. So anyway, it tells something about the brain being kind of falling short of what mind is capable of doing. Anyway, so those are things to consider and to think of the possibility of a different take in terms of the relationship between body and mind, or brain and mind. It's quite telling in the Buddhist text, there's hardly any mention of brain being a big deal. Maybe it's not a big deal. In vis-a-vis mind, it's almost like making a big deal about the radio. This I must keep because it keeps transmitting things, right? What about transmission station? If you don't, what you call facilitate that, it may go out of existence. Then the radio is no use at all. So anyway, that may be a little bias for me to say, to rationalize how there is little mention of brain. But anyway, plus from a Buddhist perspective, there are so many brainless beings, embodied beings there could be beings, embodied beings, of course, with no brain. Embodied we could call, embodied could come in several different degrees. So anyway, in new translation schools of Tantrayana, this primordially pure mind is called the clear light mind. That is the only one which has no coming, no birth, no death, no severance, nothing. All the rest. Now we are upping our understanding of mind from a Buddhist perspective when we take the subtlest clear mind into account. Then compare with that all the other mind states, mental states spoken of in the sutra, whole of sutra. At least in terms of their quality, they fall short of being something that is perennial. Whereas only this is constant, but momentarily changing, but ever maintaining its continuum. And on the basis of that, we speak of Buddhahood, very unique in the Mahayana perspective, particularly the highest Yoga Tantra perspective. We speak of the possibility of the 4 kayas. That's not mentioned in the whole of Pali Canon, I think. In the Pali Canon. And on the basis of that, and because of that, there is no presentation of 4 kayas in the Pali tradition. And thus, a Buddha, when he appears in the world, that's not a demonstration, but actual being going through ordinary being state to full awakened, just in front of us. And after he passes away into the parinirvana, he ceases to be. So I think that seems to be the position of the Pali traditions, if I may say so. At the very least, it is the position in terms of the four schools of tenets. It's the position of the Vaibhashika and the Sautantrika, even part of Chittamatra, the Lungichetang, the more orthodox. The Sutra followers, I want to call them orthodox, in a good, light sense. So in their sense, in their case, the mind ceases. We go into extinct. Literally so, including the mind itself. On that basis, then we cannot posit the possibility of a Buddha being always present. Once you become fully awakened Buddha, because the Buddhahood itself is grounded on the subtlest, clearer mind, no grosser mind at all. Because of that, its full operational state of being is capable of carry on. Because that mind, that subtlest mind, is the subtlest and has no death, no birth at all. On that basis. Okay. Any questions? Any? Yes, please. Did I ask for a problem? Trouble myself?
No quiz on brain anatomy. Don't worry. So on this point, I've gotten a bit stuck because the way that I was introduced to that idea of thinking about the mind being something that continues before conception and after death involves reflecting on our coarse mind. And so what I've struggled with is having spent time reflecting on kind of my coarse nature of mind, not that it was expressed that way, but not having that tantric perspective. It's like, oh, okay, the mind continues. The mind is this uninterruptible continuum. And now the statement is, oh, well, that gross mind you were thinking of, actually that does stop. The basis continues. So can you help me with this? Because it feels like I'd convinced myself of something that now is, okay, that not actually true.
I can assure you that's not just you. Everyone really going through the four schools of tenets could go through a very typical way. In live experience, Vasubandhu went through that. He was so obstinate in his position on things from the Vaibhashika and Sautantrika point of view. And his brother Asanga had to kind of take him under his wing and then say, he kind of pushed him. Eventually he managed to take this Chittamatra position. So Vasubandhu went through that. And this layout of the four schools of tenet is meant to do that. You start from where you are comfortable, and then you will not be kept alone. Once you have built that place, safe place, then those around you pick at you, saying, "Oh, that's," and you have no choice but to really wonder, and that's how you evolve and you change, and then move into the next one, like that. So this is very normal. This is very normal. Not just that. Not just that. In the tantric system, not that I don't know much about it. But in the tantric system, once you hit the path of seeing, you become arhat. Yeah. So yeah, the path has become more sophisticated, more enriched, whatnot. Because of that, the fruits come by quicker. Path of seeing is equivalent to being arhat. So that's another. Yeah, so it's really helpful to kind of move through the four schools, even if one doesn't really necessarily buy into one position or other, kind of is open to any, but it would be good to look at, and then more particularly try to find fault with the lower school, because that's meant to be. It's not dejecting them, but as Venerable very often suggests, these four schools are not out there. They have to be looked within you and see what position on a particular thing. In regard to that, which school are you in? You could be in too many schools at the same time. On this I'm this, on this I'm with this. So I'm part Sotantrika, part Vaibhashika, part Chittamatra, and part even Pasangika Madhavika. And then if you push further, then particularly on the subjective agency, subjective agent component part of it, then the specialty of the Vajrayana take comes. Objective view, subjective view, we can make a difference. So very often we speak of rigpa as a subjective view, and so it's a subjective view, so that you see a difference from sutra take to this level. But when it comes to the objective view, or rather it's quite difficult to speak using the term objective, because in certain cases it's what is to be negated. In certain cases you have to allow for it to a certain extent. So here objective means object. So the objective view, that is the emptiness. That's the objective view. Not that it is objectively existent, but it is speaking of it, speaking of the view in terms of an object of a perceiving consciousness. So on that regard, the Prasangika state is the final, because they have pushed it to the limit. If on the pretext of pursuing the Vajrayana take, you push the objective view also, then you will revert back to inherent existence. Yes, please.
Is it more accurate to say the subject clear light meditates on the object clear light?
The ideal is to combine the two.
Yeah.
They do not necessarily always come together.
But it's
One
not.
has to.
Yeah, but not subjective on the objective.
What do you mean?
Like it
What I call subjective view?
is the subject clear light.
Yeah, subject clear light.
Meditating on
The
the
object
object
clear light.
clear light.
Yes.
And then
The combination,
yes.
the union.
So rather than objective subjective, which is very confusing.
Oh, yeah. It is confusing, because I'm using the term myself in different contexts. In one context, I'm saying there's nothing objective. At the same time, I'm saying there is a objective view. So those are used in different contexts. Pardon?
View is also
Yeah, the view is little confusing. It is a literal translation. You see, you view, your view from your window. In that context, it is used. But what it is view in the sense of what is the ultimate sight you can expect of anything being when you have developed that. So that's the objective view in terms of the ultimate nature of existence. And then the subjective view will be what would be the subtlest ultimate state of a subjective mind, beyond which it doesn't change. So that would be the subjective view. Subjective view, yeah, I think one could speak of subjective view, and then we speak of bringing the two together. And then that is itself called a union of the clear light mind, subjective clear light mind, objective clear light mind, or in some contexts we speak of the mother clear light mind meeting the child clear light mind, yeah, in the case of death. And then eventually that becomes one part of another union. And that so you became see the sophistication of the stacking up happens more rich. Okay, we're going into areas that I'm not even aware of. I found myself walking into a totally uncharted area. And I didn't see any of you. I was all by myself. I better come back. Yeah, you're right. The terms need to be reviewed. So it will depend. It will wait. It will have to wait until we have realized English-speaking masters who could speak from their own experience. That will really make a big difference. There's so much room for improvement in how we call them in English. But for now, there's no other way but to resort to them. Eventually you say, okay, now you have served your purpose, you go, something else come. In the scripture, we speak of the analogy of jing, boat or, to cross a river. Once you have crossed it, you say, bye-bye. Thank you for serving me up to this point. Now I don't need to. Because if I need you, I would end up taking you on me. So, okay. Similar to rigpa, it continues from our present unawakened state to full awakening. So the subtle clear mind, it's the ever present of all the consciousnesses. It's the only one ever present. Not born. So we have this stanza which can be read as a praise of emptiness as the object view, or of the subject-object view combination. This stanza, which I haven't heard you say. You may say that. Masam jume, that which is inexpressible. Masam jume, inexpressible, unthinkable, right? Ineffable, inconceivable, perfection, wisdom gone beyond, not born, not ceasing, the object of the probing wisdom. So it lists some 6, 7 masam one that is in the nature of space. This is the uncompounded space. Some 9 qualities. So it could be. Do you say this? Yeah. Oh, that's yeah, that part I don't know. But usually we recite it in usually we recite it before reciting the Heart Sutra or before reciting Manjushri's names, name sutra. So it's quite telling those qualities can be applied to the object, clear-light mind, emptiness itself, and make emptiness as an object of reverence, which is in that particular context. Otherwise, emptiness is everywhere. No, it is not a holy thing in and of itself. But at the same time, these same qualities can be applied to the subject clear-light mind also, more particularly or more exclusively, only applicable to the subtlest clear-light mind. All the others are not maji minga, not born, not ceasing. They do get born, they do cease, but not this. Okay. Similar to rigpa, it continues from our present awakened state to full awakening. Now the question is whether it remains manifest all throughout or sometimes unmanifest. So if one is to equate it to rigpa, it seems like it's always present. It's always not just present, but even manifest. But in accordance with this new transmission school, when you speak of the subtlest clear mind, it becomes manifest only when the gross consciousnesses, all the gross consciousnesses, grosser to them, grosser to it, grosser than it, have subsided. Only then it can manifest, otherwise not. So the practice is to not only generate it voluntarily, but even maintain it, and thus be able to kind of stay on it. And that's only what Buddhas can do. The whole being is fully, completely, actively operational, functional on that basis. Plus their body is fully, actively, and solely dependent and based on the subtlest energy. That's why we speak of not so conventional qualities about the Buddhas because of that. Yes, did you have a question?
So that's what you're doing in Thubten as well, right? Just
Yeah, there's no, as far as I understand, there's no guarantee whether you are in Thubten in that subtlest clear mind or some mind, those subtlest, but not quite the subtlest of the subtlest. So I'm not so sure. It could be after you have been clinically declared dead, And what sets on is what becomes manifest is the other three subtlest clay-light mind, not the subtlest of the subtlest. So during that time, so after you declare clinically dead, you still have those four levels, four process, four stages of dissolution. So Thubten could be in any of that state or through that state. So it's very difficult to pinpoint. I mean, at least how I understand, because because to be able to really what do you call seize the subtle mind correctly and be able to really stay in it, it takes a lot of practice and efforts, and to call it being what every practitioner is capable of doing, I think it's a little difficult. But basically I'm saying it could be somewhere in between and not even hit that and then release and come out of it. I think it could be possible. So it's not necessarily always the most subtle clear-light mind, I think. But
would it make sense to say then that the Thubten that different people enter, there would be different results from that? Like not, or is there an assurance if you enter Thubten? Seems like you'd have to have that subtle fundamental mind to realize emptiness and then achieve Buddhahood in the bargain.
See, you brought it up. The reason why I was saying it could be anywhere between, and then there would be a very difference in the quality. Now you're talking of not only being able to seize the subtlest of the subtlest clear mind, but even be able to bring emptiness unmistakably in it. So that means one would have to have emptiness understanding correctly and be able to really catch that exact, and then combine the two. It calls for lots of experience and lots of so. So I do not have any scriptural basis for that and direct scriptural basis for that. I'm just working from around and then coming up with this idea, but based on what it takes for it to be that ideal state of Thubten, etc. Yes.
So when we refer to the exalted wisdom mind, which mind are we specifically or generally speaking of?
The term exalted wisdom is it's very general. It's not necessarily pointing to the subtlest clear mind. It's pointing to it depends. Either it is pointing to the path, consciousness that has become part of the path, because very often the text speak of them as kempa, exalted knowledge. That's how Jeffrey used to translate it, kempa. And kempa is, although it's called knowledge, but doesn't necessarily have to be cognitive in nature. It could be any any positive cultivation of the mind, which has now taken the status of being a path. So it could range from, because Kempa is not necessarily confined to Arya beings, but how we use it is referring in a reverent, honorific way to any path-based consciousness, be it cognitive in nature or affective in nature, like that. So there, in the sutra context also we use it. So that has nothing to do with the subtlest clear-eyed mind. But when it is used in this tantra and whatnot, it could have. So it can pervade, yeah. Yeah, we should push through this paragraph at least. Unlike rigpa, which is manifest while the coarse consciousnesses are functioning, the innate clear-eyed mind, in accordance with as spoken of in the New Translation School, is said to manifest only when the coarse consciousnesses, which includes the afflictions, have absorbed or subsided at the time of death or due to special tantric practices. It doesn't necessarily have to be time of death. Time of death is when it naturally happens, even to the animals also. To everyone who dies, the nature of mind of the death state is not other than the subtlest clear-eyed mind. But for many of us, it just passes without any sense. What? You die, going through the process, you kind of, it's almost like going to a surgery or like that. You are given anesthesia. You know before you go into it. Very often they are very skillful. The doctors who work, they would talk to you, right? It's almost like talking you into sleep. And then that next moment when you wake up, they're gone. They're not interested in the conversation. Otherwise they will be there and say, okay, where did we leave? Okay. Yeah, so the innate clear-eyed mind is said to manifest only when the coarse consciousnesses, which include afflictions, have absorbed at the time of death or due to special tantra. So it could be generated and actualized, manifested while alive through actual practices. And in this regard, His Holiness the Dalai Lama very clearly mentions that for all sentient beings, irrespective of what planet they may be from or what realm they may be from, the only way to become fully awakened is by way of actualizing and employing the subtlest clear-eyed mind. But in terms of how they do that, it will depend on their physiological makeup. The one that's taught in the Tantra in this text is only pertaining to this world of ours, not to other body systems. But nonetheless, being sentient, you can never be separated from your mind, and that mind necessarily have to be in its ideal form, in the subtlest clear mind. So it has to be one way or the other. So some other Buddhas can be teaching the same sutra, but not the same Vajrayana. Yes.
It's just arose because of my sneezing, where Venerable Losang mentioned that, well, one of the ways that the clear mind manifests is when you sneeze or you faint or you orgasm, or so it's just very interesting to see like this subtlest, like we've been talking about the relationship between the body and the mind, and it's quite why when you sneeze, like it's such a mundane, random thing, seemingly, that this
You
precious mind.
watch yourself. When you sneeze, you can completely throw away. You even sneeze away all the coarse mind. And all the coarse mind have already completely gone. It would have made the way for the subtlest, the poor, subtlest mind sleeping, have no choice but to awake. Now everybody is gone. I must do something. It's very similar to here. When you have something emergency going, you look around, nobody's there. You have to step up. That's exactly what is happening there. I explained myself very clearly, right? Well, I haven't heard about sneezing as much, but yawning. Sneezing may be a little far-fetched. I don't know. But very fun. So, yeah. Okay, I think we should stop. Yeah, we finished one paragraph. Oh, did you finish? Oh, yeah, we did. Otherwise, I wouldn't sleep. Okay.